Hi, everybody. So, as Topeka mentioned, we're going to cover project intake today. This is a pre-configured Power Platform solution that integrates with both the Microsoft Project, PPM, like Project Online. It could also integrate with maybe Azure DevOps, Project for the Web, Planner, Teams. Really depends exactly on how you want your intake process to flow. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to start a project intake request. And here I have it embedded inside of Project Online. So I'm just going to create a new request. And I'll show you a couple different variations of this as we go through the demo, because depending on what you're trying to accomplish, your forms and whatnot may look different. But essentially, what we're doing is we're leveraging the Power Platform to automate the intake app. So one of the components we're going to use first is Powerapps. Powerapps allows us to create the interface, the user interface that our requesters will interact with. You can either embed them into a SharePoint site, like I have it here. You could also build this as maybe a tablet app. So maybe someone's using a Microsoft Surface or an iPad, they could use that. You could also even do this with maybe a phone app. Project intake probably doesn't really go too well with a phone app, but if someone's sitting there and they want to put in a project request, they could even do it through a phone app. But essentially what this allows us to do is to create the UI that you want to collect the information that'll start the process. In the past, you may have used InfoPath forms or Nintex forms, other solutions like that. But with the Microsoft Cloud and the Power Platform, Powerapps is really the way to go. You don't have to buy any additional subscriptions or anything like that. Usually this is included in your Office 365 license, at least for the standard connectors. If you want to connect to other systems that maybe be premium, then it could be additional licensing. But again, you probably have already bought this capability, so let's take advantage of it. So what we're looking at here is a project intake form. And you can see the way we've built this is we have a form on each tab where we can collect the different information and then tab over, collect the other information that we want. We could also do attachments to include them as part of the intake process. So if you have maybe a vendor spec or requirements document, for example, you can include that. What we're going to do in the back end is leverage Power Automate to walk it through whatever the approval process is. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and start creating a request. I'm going to keep it pretty simple here. I'm just going to say September 24th webinar. I can specify who the project sponsor is going to be. And again, this is my demo environment. So for your specific process, we would reconfigure it to collect the information that you want to collect at that initial stage. This project sponsor is doing a lookup against your Active Directory. And then we have request type. So with request type, one of the really nice things that we can do with, in particular, Power Automate is how do we automate that when a intake comes in, a new intake request comes in, it goes through the approval process, and we determine that it's of a specific project type. Maybe it's an IT project, maybe it's a development project, maybe it's just a marketing campaign. For demo purposes, I have it out here on the initial screen, but with a lot of our customers, this will actually be later on in our process. When someone reviews the request, they'll determine what kind of request is it, and then they'll pick the appropriate request type. What's important with this, though, is when we pick that request type, it allows us to standardize how that type of request is going to be managed. So for example, if I pick IT project, maybe it's going to go to Project Online and automatically create an IT project type in Project Online with a schedule template, SharePoint site template, maybe a governance workflow, all those capabilities that you have in Project Online. Power Automate would then kick off a new project of that type. If it's a marketing campaign, Maybe we don't need all the capabilities of Project Online. Maybe we just need Microsoft Teams and Planner, something simpler, or maybe Project for the web. So in a case like that, we could have it route and automatically create the project in that appropriate technology. And then if we want to do maybe a Scrum or Agile type project and we want to use Azure DevOps, well, then we can route it to automatically create an epic over in Azure DevOps. Okay, so Power Automate gives us a lot of this capability that we really never had before, but allows us to wire together these different processes and help you standardize how, when these requests come in, how are we going to route them through the through both the approvals, but then also automate the creation of the projects. So in this case, I'm just going to create an IT project. Now, we also have other fields here where we would capture additional information. And, this is kind of some of your typical requests. But what I'm actually going to do is copy and paste some text into these, just so we can see what happens with this text. Because as this information is being entered into here, we could then reuse it either to pre-populate fields on the project, send it out in email notifications, put it into reporting and dashboarding. We can reuse all this information. And our go live date is tomorrow. That's typically what you get told, right? Mm-hmm. And if we want to capture some financials, in this case, I'm just asking what's your proposed budget? Has it been approved? Keep it pretty basic, but we could build out a more detailed, financial breakdown if we wanted to. And as I mentioned, last thing that we have here is the ability to attach files. So if you do have that spec or requirements document, anything that you want to include into the process, you'll be able to include it. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and save it. Now for this scenario, I'm simply saving it back to a SharePoint list. You could also save it to CDS, which is part of the Power Platform, the Common Data Service. You could save it to other databases as well. In this case, I'm keeping it pretty simple. So you can see there's our request that came in and all the information. But you would also have a list of all the different requests that have come through. As you can see, I do tons of demos. But with any of these, we'd be able to go in and see what's the current status, what's going on with that particular request. Now, what's actually happening in my demo environment right now is I should be getting an email notification saying that someone submitted a request and it needs to be reviewed and approved. So let me check my email here.
And Neil, while you do that, just in terms of the project intake app, all those fields are configurable, right?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So for us as a pre-configured solution, we'll use that kind of as your starting point. And then we would go through some requirements, take a look at your existing intake process if you have that, and then we would add and configure additional fields to capture the information. The other thing that we can do too, so I'll come back to this email in a minute. I go back to this request. A lot of times we'll have additional tabs visible only to the people that are managing the process. So for example, once the original requester put in their submittal, we might have a PMO admin tab or finance approval tab, where the people that are part of that particular process, they're the only ones that will have access to that tab. And then they can make some decisions on the request as it moves through the overall process. For this one, I'm keeping it pretty basic. I'm not doing anything fancy like that, but that's definitely something that we commonly do. So here you can see the email that got sent out. So you can see a new request got submitted. There's the name, who submitted it, my email address. And then below here, as I mentioned, all the different fields that we're capturing, we can then reuse that either to pre-populate fields in the project, send them out in email notifications, or put into different reporting. In particular, a lot of our customers like this because by putting it in the email, The person who's doing the review doesn't necessarily have to go and open the entire thing. If they look at this and we have enough information, they could just approve it right here in the email, or down here they have a link that'll take them back to that particular request, and then they can approve it. But as you can see, we have approve, reject right here inside the email. You can also add additional buttons. Maybe you need more information. Maybe you want to reroute it. Maybe it shouldn't have came to you for approval. It needs to be rerouted to somebody else. So we can have additional buttons as well. But when I click on approve or reject, we have the ability to put in a comment if we want. So this looks, and then we can submit it. Now, when we submit it, it kind of goes back to that request type. So based on the request type that I had specified, it's now going to connect to that other environment: Project Online, Project for the Web, Teams, Planner, Azure DevOps, and then it's going to automatically create the project over there. So in this case, since I said it was an IT project, I'm going to go into here, go into the Project Center, and as you can see, I have a ton of projects in here, but there you can see our 0924 webinar project. So once I approved it, Power Automate connected the project online, went ahead and created the project automatically based on that IT project type. So using that IT project type, you can see in my environment that includes a governance workflow. So we can see what phases, stages, gates does the project have to go through. It has the schedule template. So as I go into here, I can see there's that IT project schedule template pre-populated with generic resources. And then if I look at the business case, with the business case, we mapped those fields that we were capturing during the project intake process. So this is an example of, again, taking that information, pre-populating the fields over in the project. All right, so you can see everything that I had filled out there is pre-populated into the business case page. Okay. Any questions so far with this particular case?
No, it looks good. Thanks.
Okay. Topeka, did I miss anything with that one?
No, I think that looked good. I know there are variations with scoring, but
yeah, we're going to take a look at scoring as well in a second. One thing I would add to that too is not just, and we're going to cover this when I do the Teams integration, but for example, in the case I just created and approved our webinar project, for that particular request type, I was also automatically creating a Microsoft team and then integrating it with Project Online. So if I were to go to Teams, and whoops, that's the meeting. I keep doing that. All right, where do Teams go? All right, I'm not seeing, oh, there it is, dogs right there. So if I go into here, look at Teams, and again, I'm going to cover this in more depth later, but we should see, it hasn't created it yet, but we'll see a 0924 webinar project here in a minute. Okay. And again, that's all part of that automation for that particular request type. So next thing I want to do is, what if we want to take it a step further, right? So that was where we took an intake request, we routed it through an approval, but we were just collecting pretty basic information. You know, what was the purpose? What does it? What's the objectives? What's it accomplishing? What are the benefits? Things like that. Now, if you're in a Project Online environment, maybe you want to leverage, you know, the portfolio analysis capability to do your prioritization and more of the strategic planning. In the case where you're doing it in Project Online, the intake that I just showed you is perfect for that. You collect all the ideas, you approve them, and then once again in Project Online, you would add additional information, such as driver alignment, maybe some more detailed financial information, things like that. And then you would do your portfolio analysis. But what we do run into quite a bit is sometimes you don't want the project to get that far. You want to do a kind of a first run of, what is the scoring for this particular request? Maybe you want to ask the requester some of those questions. Maybe they'll think twice about what they're requesting. So one of the things that we could do is we could also build the scoring right into the intake app. So I'm going to show you an example of that here. And this intake app also will kind of give you, as you can see, we're not necessarily using a SharePoint list with this. So in the app itself, you can see all the different requests that have been submitted, who submitted them, what department is it related to, who's the project sponsor, what was the score, which is the point I'm showing you this particular app. What's the current status, right? So all of this is right here in this Power App. I have it embedded into a SharePoint site, but it could also be looked at on an iPad or a Surface, whatever device you want. So from a scoring perspective, if I were to go in and let's say I want to create a new proposal, and this particular environment I'm in right now, they're more geared as project proposals, but you could easily extrapolate this to a full-blown business case as well. So you can see on this variation of it, we're collecting the project name, who it's requested by, what department, sponsor, location, proposed start, proposed finish as a part of a program. We also have the business case, right? So what's our problem statement, expected benefits, costs, benefits, and then what's our proposed go live. But then we also have this scoring tab. And again, the whole idea with this is we're presenting these questions back to the requester, to one, make them give a little more thought to what they're requesting. But two, when it gets into the actual approval process, you'll be able to see what that initial priority score was. So in here, we have different strategic objectives and then some different values. If you use the portfolio analysis capability in Project Online, this is a similar model, but it's not in Project Online. We're doing this at the Power App. So if I go into here and I start selecting and answering these questions, so expanding into new markets and segments, I think my project's going to pull in 2 million, right? So I look at this, grows revenue from new markets and segments from 1 million to 3 million. So I'm going to pick that. And then I'm going to go through, pick some other values. And as I'm picking these, you can see our priority score is getting calculated. So what it's doing, and we would work with you to set up exactly how you would want to do the scoring. But each of these are weighted. And then depending on what you select, it awards so many points. And then the combination of the two is what's given us that score. So as I go through it here and I keep selecting these, we'll see the score adjust. Okay, and it's adjusting on the fly. So again, we're accomplishing two different things here. One is we're asking the requester on the front end, answer some of these, at least first pass. So we'll have a rough priority score. But then two, once we have that score, we could then use it in the prioritization of all these requests, which ones are more important that we should move forward with. All right. So again, this is just another variation of that first intake app I showed you. All right. And then I can go ahead and submit this, but I don't think I filled out all the required fields. So I'm not going to go through all that, but I really wanted to just show you the scoring capability. Does anybody have any questions with this part of it? From speech. All right. So let me cancel out of here. So again, in the Power App, you can see for each of those requests that have been submitted, now you can start to see what the score was. And then you could prioritize this. Of course, with this information as well, you could display it inside Power BI dashboards, or if you're pushing it over into Project Online, you could have it pre-populated as a score within Project Online. And you could still use the portfolio analysis in Project Online if you want to do that deeper cut later on, because you probably would have more financial information, more resource needs your demand would be in Project Online, so you can take another cut at it once you get to that point. All right. Any questions? One at a
Neil,
time.
the one question I received was, in this specific scenario too, you can add other tabs, correct?
Yeah, everything that I said in the first scenario would still apply to this. So you could have additional tabs and tailor it. And then you could also have tabs that are hidden. They're only displayed to certain roles that are in the process.
And that was the last question I had.
All right. Well, if there's no more questions, I'll hand it back to my bosses. And then we'll go from there.
Thanks, Neil.